Good afternoon, everybody, and thanks for joining us for today's webinar. By way of introduction, I'd just like to spend a couple of minutes giving you some background as to NeoGrid. We are a company founded in Brazil in 1999, where we are today a dominant player in the supply chain synchronization and demand visibility space, with presence in both North America, Europe, and Asia. We're fortunate to have over 500 clients across multiple industries and geographies, and you see some of the clients itemized on this slide. And in support of those clients, we have over 700 supply chain professionals across 5 continents, ready and able to serve our customers. Our mission as a company is to increase our clients' profitability through faster response to demand, optimizing in-store availability, and to maximize their sales at the lowest level of inventory possible. And we work hard across those geographies to make sure that that happens on a day-to-day basis. And some of the ways in which we do that is through, one, providing a multi-tier visibility into their supply chain, most critically around visibility to ultimate demand at the consumer level, but also providing detailed, granular, and timely visibility into upstream nodes of the supply chain on an ongoing basis. We couple that visibility with advanced analytics to help drive a number of supply chain operations, including inventory optimization, replenishment practices, demand planning, both on the short and long term, vendor managed inventory, as well as availability measurement techniques. In addition to those advanced analytics, in order to make sure that people can take advantage of them, a lot of our services are around automating the supply chain. And what we find is that with the increased number of actions and decisions required today to run an optimal supply chain, automation is increasingly a must for supply chains to be effective. So with that as background, let me move on to the meat of today's webinar. If we start off by looking at today's landscape that I think we all find ourselves in, both the biggest threat and the biggest opportunity that we face is through the emergence and the domination of online. Online today is not about what's next, it's about what's now. And it's a reality that we all have to live with, take advantage of, and prosper as a consequence of it. And clearly there's been a huge amount of success. The poster child is obviously Amazon, who, the gee whiz facts of today, $222,000 of sales per minute across 368 million separate items that are available on their website. And that success is clearly driven by a number of factors, but some of the most prominent ones we believe are the convenience that it offers, obviously the vast assortment, as well as their ability to create customization for each and every visitor and consumer of their sites. And within that reality, retailers respond in a number of ways. Frankly, some of them more successfully than others, but some of the common threads that we see in terms of how retailers are trying to respond to this is many of them are successfully moving into an omni-channel strategy. Virtually all of them are attempting to accelerate their customer engagement. And as part of that, often we find a proliferation of the number of items that they're stocking, and that assortment is becoming more and more store specific as they try to cater more effectively to the specific needs of their localized consumer base. But regardless of the level of customization, consumer engagement, how many products you have in assortment, etc., first base is on-shelf availability. Frankly, if the consumer walks into the store and the items that they're looking for is not on the shelf, pretty much nothing else matters. So we really do see that as a very critical first base towards success. But as we speak to retailers and manufacturers around the world, we find that there's a little bit of a disconnect between their perception of what their availability is, which very often we hear quoted in the 97-99% range, and what we measure as the true numbers being closer to the 90-95%, and in certain instances within a specific category or an item, it may well be significantly below that. And that gap between reality and perception is a large one and provides a significant opportunity for improvement, ranging from anywhere in the $20 to $70 million range per $1 billion in sales for a retailer. So we have that disconnect. It's pretty broad-based, and we've spent quite a lot of time talking to a variety of retailers and manufacturers to try and understand what's behind this disconnect. And we found a few common themes that are cropping up time and again. One, we see a lot of people trying to use DC in-stocks or warehouse in-stocks as a proxy to on-shelf availability. And frankly, it's not a very good proxy. There is often a disconnect between what is available in the warehouse and what is actually available to the consumer on the shelf. We also find a lot of people relying on inaccurate data through their perpetual inventory systems, which you're probably aware are notorious for their inaccuracy. And we've seen a number of studies around the world citing that around 65% of perpetual inventory data has some level of inaccuracy. The third common disconnect that we find is retailers measuring on-shelf availability at the wrong time, and specifically after the morning or the evening restocking of the shelves. That's great after you've restocked them, but it tells you nothing about what your availability was like during the course of the day. And then finally, and my favorite, is the perennial question that we've all been asked about a bazillion times. We're at the checkout and we're asked, did you find everything you were looking for today? And I don't know about you, my response is always yes, because I have 7 people behind me, and what I want to do is get home and get this over and done with. So while it's polite, it is not really an effective data collection methodology by any means. So those are some of the practices that we see which are ineffective. So what are some of the more effective practices of measuring and responding to on-shelf availability? Firstly, we believe that the right place to measure on-shelf availability is from the consumer's perspective. If the inventory is in the warehouse or in the back room or on the truck or in any location other than the shelf where the consumer is, it's frankly irrelevant to that particular consumer. The right time of addressing on-shelf availability is before they occur, to take proactive actions through identification of the root causes of those on-shelf availability issues and by taking preventative actions to avoid them from happening in the first place. So that's what we believe a better or more ideal way of dealing with the issue is, but frankly it's not what we are finding most common practice in the industry. More common is a reactive process, and while many participants don't even measure on-shelf availability, those that do, the process thinking that they go through is, well, I have some process of identifying when I have an out-of-stock situation. Once I do that, I alert the relevant party. Hopefully they take action and provide some feedback into the system as to what they found and what they corrected. All well and good, but that's fixing today's problems. And the problem with that is you've already lost sales. These interventions are expensive and often ineffective because there is a mismatch of the issue and the people available to take remedial action not being available at the same place at the right time. So rather than that, what we believe is a more effective process of addressing on-shelf availability is to set up a process by which it is accurately measured in a timely and granular basis. Where a out-of-stock situation is detected, that relevant parties are alerted, but most importantly, they're alerted not only to the fact that there is an out-of-stock situation, but also with details of the root causes of that incidence, and by building up a knowledge base of root causes, one is able to begin to predict when future out-of-stock occurrences will occur, and with that prescribe actions which will prevent the out-of-stocks from happening in the first place rather than fixing what's already been broken. So that's great, but how do you do that? Well, to go into a little bit more detail on a couple of those aspects, if we look at the measurement or identification process for out of stocks, we think the right place to start is by understanding what your true inventory positions are, both what's reported in the perpetual inventory system, and where that is wrong, a methodology of understanding that an error exists and what the right number, so to speak, is. With that insight, you also need to then look at actual sales and compare that to what you expected to be sold at that particular location at that particular point in time. And those expected sales if I look at a consumer goods environment, need to be able to differentiate between a regular turn movement versus promoted movement and have appropriate expectations based on the specific circumstances that are evident at that particular store. Once you have those, and where a gap exists between expected sales and actuals, it's important to understand whether that gap is significant. What is the probability of that gap to be caused by out of stocks? And where that gap is significant enough to flag a potential out of stock situation, it's then that the root causes should be identified, as I was saying earlier, the relevant and available parties alerted to that situation, and reporting of the incidents as well as the ongoing availability rates used as a KPI, as well as a feed onto or into a variety of supply chain systems and processes which are dependent on being driven by true demand for the product. So that's a kind of measurement process or thinking which we believe is the most effective way of trying to understand and measure on-shelf availability. It is a pretty simple kind of description. The reality is behind there are quite a lot of complex analytics and algorithms that are needed to be able to detect whether inventory is accurate or not, to be able to understand what the expected sales are, what the probability of a gap being as a result of out of stocks, root causes, etc., etc. And speaking of root causes, what we find as we measure on-shelf availability across retailers, across various countries, there are a few common themes and common causes that we see. Probably the most prevalent of them is phantom inventory, phantom stock, which is simply where your perpetual inventory or other inventory system is reporting that you have X amount of inventory. I have 10 units in stock, but the reality is you have none, right? That inventory exists only in the ether and not in reality on the shelf. Often we find that orders not being placed at the right time or orders not being received correctly, shrink, negative stock, the stock not being on shelf, i.e. we find a number of situations where a retailer will show inventory being available in the store, and that number may well be accurate. I have 10 units in that store, but that inventory is stuck in the back room of the store. From a consumer's perspective, again, that's irrelevant, and they'll look at a hole in the shelf and there comes to the conclusion you don't have it and move on. So those are some of the more common root causes that we come across and need to be addressed if one is to effectively prevent out of stocks from occurring in the future. And having identified those incidences and causes of the outages, it is critical that there is an effective methodology of distributing those insights to the relevant parties that can take action, and to be able to help them prioritize the actions that they need to take based on the lost opportunity, which is a consequence of that particular out-of-stock situation. So that provides hopefully a little bit of an overview of how to identify and inform and address out-of-stock situations. But it goes a little bit beyond that, because the impact of an out-of-stock situation goes beyond having missed a couple of sales today. And to give you an example of that, this is an example of a particular item in a store looking at sales on a daily basis. So period 1, they sold 10, period 2, 12, etc., for a total weekly sales of 59 units. And in terms of their inventory position, we see the inventory, fluctuating in line with the, both deliveries and the sales going out of the store. But on period 4 and period 5, there was an out-of-stock situation which was occurred or occasioned by phantom inventory. So their perpetual inventory system said they had, whatever 10 units in stock where they didn't, and in period 4 they lost 10 units, in period 5 they lost 12, got a delivery on the subsequent day, and everything went back to normal. End of story. Well, not really, because yes, they sold 59, but they lost 22. So the true demand for that product in that particular location was not 59, but it was 81. And the decision that needs to be made is for my downstream and upstream supply chain systems, what do I feed them with? Do I feed them with the sales information? That, if we do that without any adjustment for demand or lost sales, one's in danger of going into an ever-diminishing cycle, because you can't sell more than what you supplied, and if you're shorting your supply, sales will tend to continue to diminish. Far better is to feed and empower your replenishment and various supply chain systems with a true understanding of demand potential for the item, and to have the supply chain respond as a consequence of that signal. And the way to do that, and clearly we have some capabilities in this area. In our particular circumstances, we use a technique called dynamic buffer management, which is essentially a technique which takes in sales and demand and inventory levels and minimal order quantities and delivery schedules, etc., to understand what is the optimal amount of inventory that you should have at any given point in time, and the dynamic aspect of this is being adjusted on a daily basis to reflect the most current situation and the most current sort of circumstances. And we use that insight to drive replenishment both at the DC and at the individual store level, and provide our customers with an overview of which products in which locations are optimally stocked, have very high, very low, or zero inventory, so that they can drive their replenishment processes appropriately. One more aspect that I think is important with respect to today's supply chain reality is the fact that is required sort of millions of decisions to be made on a day in, day out basis. And to do that, one has to have an effective prioritization criteria and automation of those prioritizations to be able to use the limited resources that we all have against the highest priority issues of the day. We believe that the most effective way of doing that is to prioritize your actions based on risk mitigation, both the risk of critically low inventory resulting in out of stocks and low levels of on-shelf availability, as well as in situations where you have excess inventory, which is obviously, an unproductive use of capital, and our system works towards increasing the inventory for those items which are obviously below the ideal state, and adjusting future orders and deliveries to bring down those products with excess inventory and to move them to that optimal situation. So, we've spoken about the criticality of understanding inventory and demand and on-shelf availability, and some of the challenges, not least of which is the availability, accuracy, and granularity of the right type of data to drive your various processes. And to address some of these issues, we have partnered with Mojix, a leader in the RFID space, which allows us to marry their real-time granular inventory data gathered through advanced RFID technologies and marry that with our supply chain synchronization capabilities to end up with a smarter, more responsive supply chain. And with that, I'd like to pass you over to Johan, which will go into a little bit more detail around the place of RFID within the smart supply chain.
Thank you, Paris. Thank you for this great intro. So let me give you a quick overview of what we do, and Paris already touched on these points quite a few times throughout this presentation, but really we are here to help with the visibility and predictability conundrum. Where is my stuff? When will it arrive? What do I have on hand? How many? And the reality of today is there are some things you know, and there is quite a lot of things that you don't know at all. You have no visibility whatsoever on what you have on hand for most of the supply chain, actually. Even when it is in store, you have incorrect numbers to work with, which means that you have to make decisions based on assumptions. So making decisions based on assumptions for volume, timing, and product mix means overstock and, like Paris described also, quite out-of-stock situations. So how do we do this at Mojix? RFID is part of what we offer as a solution, but we have a full stack, actually, that includes not only RFID technology, wide area RFID technology that marries some overhead and also handheld readers, an IoT platform that is designed to collect the information that are produced by our RFID solution and offer basically actionable data in real time. And finally, professional services. No implementation is alike, and we always basically offer services to the company we work with, not only to work with the existing system they have in place, but also to make the system work with future systems they might want to implement going forward. So a little more detail on RFID and what we offer. It's not quite the old RFID technology you are familiar with. The origin of our technology takes place in actually the mid-90s, a project for NASA where a spaceship actually was lost in deep space, and deep space, I mean 570 million miles away from the location it was supposed to be at. And the founder of Mojix and his team were tasked to be able to detect the faint RFID signal that the spacecraft was sending. So they developed new hardware and new algorithm to be able to detect these very, very faint signals. And this technology is used today in the products that we offer. Concretely, what does it do? What do we offer? Well, this advanced hardware and algorithm solution allows us to be a lot more accurate in terms of detection capability than about any other RFID system out there. We can detect a signal that is about 100 times weaker than a standard RFID system. The other part that it allows us to do is being pretty accurate in terms of determining the position of where an item is at. So we can do, through passive RFID tags, we can determine the XY location of an item, which was until very recently only available through active tags. For those of you who are not familiar with the difference between active tag and passive tags don't have a battery. An active tag has a battery, is more expensive, and has a specific lifetime. There is also a much higher cost on the active tag part. And again, all of this information that is collected today by our RFID systems are sent to our an IoT platform. So we basically give you an RTLS real-time location, passive RFID tracking technology. We give you real-time data, so you know what you have on hand right now, at any time during the day. You don't have to wait until the end of the day to figure out what is your inventory position. And we also collect time series, so we have full traceability at the item level when they have been tagged. What it means truly is we will give you full visibility of what you have in your store, what you have on hand right now, and we'll basically enable a smart inventory capability for all of the items that you sell. So we'll provide you not only high accuracy in terms of your inventory numbers. The accuracy that we reach are above the 99%, versus in the retail space is usually about 65% inventory accuracy. We'll also be able to gather a whole new sets of sales indicators that you didn't have access to before, like sales velocity. How long did an item spend on a specific shelf before it was actually sold? And we'll give you actionable and contextual data. And let me show you really a diagram that will illustrate this a little more concretely on your end. So imagine a sales floor where basically we geofence your retail sales floor. And within each of the sections that we can give you not only an overview of all of the items that you have on hand, but we can also pinpoint to specific items in these specific departments and tell you exactly the numbers that you have on hand. We can also give you, based on the geofencing, we can give you, and parameters that you share with us, we can give you some alerts that would indicate that a specific item needs to be replenished. We can also go further and tell you that the items that are on your sales floor have not been placed accurately in the different departments. And if you go a step even further than this and imagine that your workforce also have RFID tags, you could potentially tell to the manager of your store when one of the employees has exceeded a specific dwell time in a specific area. You can also have an alert if personnel on the floor is unauthorized to be in a specific area. And we have also done what we call location-based assignment based on the information that you have on your inventory and based on the location that you have for your workforce. You can basically assign a specific task to the closest clerk within a department. So hopefully this small animation gives you an idea of what we can achieve through real-time visibility and collection of data with our platform. Now, combine the multi-tier visibility and synchronization and the overall advanced algorithm that NeoGrid offers with our real-time visibility and sales indicator at the item level. And we also have the ability to gather data from all parties, again, in real time, whenever tracking is available. And we will share this real-time inventory data with NeoGrid. So their algorithms that are already working very, very well will not only get real-time, but also contextual data they never had access to before, and will be even more accurate in predicting or helping you with inventory replenishment and overall stock levels. Now, this overall visibility can be, again, implemented throughout the supply chain. We can do full traceability from manufacturing down to the store and even the POS. So we can do full visibility, real-time visibility from production to point of sale. And all of this information collected in real time really gives you a low friction supply chain and allows you to be a lot more nimble and being able to basically work with actionable and accurate data that you didn't have access to before.
Thank you, Johan. And just to wrap this up and summarize, enabling a digital transformation into a smart supply chain, we believe requires real-time data coupled with advanced analytics and advanced algorithms so that you can have a higher level of accuracy as well as predictability in your supply chain. And it also requires boosting automation of your decisions and collaboration with your trading partners and agility to be able to respond to the various situations that invariably crop up in a timely manner. And also, true end-to-end visibility, we think, is a critical component of success so that each node of the supply chain can be informed about other nodes and respond appropriately. And probably most importantly, the smart supply chain is consumer and demand-centric and is able to react, respond, and fulfill consumer demand fully. And with that, I'd like to thank you for your attendance. I hope you found this interesting and possibly useful. And we will open it up to any questions that anybody may have.
This is Vaughn again. If you have any questions, please enter them into the chat box. But for now, I would like to address the question that we did get in advance of the webinar. And this first question is this POS data? We might want to direct that one to our speaker, Johan.
Point of sale data? Yes, we can actually. We have tied our system to various POS systems, like Checkpoint, for example, so that again we have a full overview of the product life cycle when it is on the sales floor itself. We can tell you what is in the back room, we can tell you what is on the shelf, and we can tell you what has been sold or what is about to get sold, because we can basically locate the item the items that we are tracking within the floor plan in real time.
Yeah, and when we were talking about the sort of on-shelf availability part, and we were trying to distinguish between sales and demand, the sales data that I was referring to is point-of-sale information. So it's leveraged by sort of all parties in this context.
And for us, I can tell you that when we set up a system with retail partners, the location of an item also defines its status. So something that is in the back room is not on the sales floor, has a different status than something that is on the sales floor, something that is actually in a promotional rack. So we have actually what we call the user-defined fields. You can have as many user-defined fields that you would want for a specific item, from brand to color to size to inventory level that you want by default and so on. And you can again have access to this data in real time.
Thank you so much.